Bullies spit on the shy girl's lunch. Her MMA training made them regret it. 16-year-old Beatrice Worthington had always been easy to overlook. With her slight frame barely reaching 5 feet 3 inches, mousy brown hair that hung limply around her shoulders, and thick-rimmed glasses that seemed too large for her delicate face, she moved through the hallways of Westbridge High School like a ghost. Her uniform always fit a little too loosely, hanging off her thin shoulders, and she had a habit of hunching forward as if trying to disappear into herself. She had transferred to Westbridge 3 months ago when her father's job relocated the family across the country. Starting junior year at a new school was challenging enough, but Beatrice's natural shyness made it nearly impossible to connect with anyone. She spent her lunches alone, her free periods in the library, and her walks between classes with her eyes fixed firmly on the ground. What none of her classmates knew was that Beatrice had spent the last 8 years training in mixed martial arts. Her father, a former military man, had enrolled her in classes when she was 8 after a particularly brutal bullying incident at her old elementary school. "Never again," he had told her, "will you be helpless." Under the guidance of Master Rodriguez, a former UFC fighter, Beatrice had developed into a formidable athlete. Her lean frame hid muscles that could deliver devastating strikes, and her quiet demeanor masked the mind of a strategic fighter who had won 3 regional championships in her age group. But Master Rodriguez had taught her more than just technique. True strength, he would say, is knowing when not to fight. Beatrice carried this philosophy with her, choosing peace over conflict, even when it meant enduring humiliation. She had promised her parents she would focus on her studies and avoid trouble at her new school. Fighting, even in self-defense, seemed like a betrayal of that promise. The main source of her torment came in the form of 3 students who had marked her as their primary target within her first week at Westbridge. The ringleader was Jessica Manning, a tall, athletic 17-year-old with platinum blonde hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged. As captain of the volleyball team and daughter of the school board president, Jessica wielded considerable social power. She had the sharp tongue of someone who had learned early that words could cut deeper than any blade. Her primary lieutenant was Marcus Thompson, a hulking 18-year-old who had been held back a year and used his size to intimidate anyone who crossed his path. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders earned from hours in the weight room, Marcus was the kind of person who enjoyed making others feel small. His cruel laugh echoed through the hallways whenever he spotted potential prey. The third member of their trio was Samantha Pike, a petite redhead whose innocent appearance masked a vicious streak. She was Jessica's best friend and had perfected the art of psychological warfare through social media and whispered rumors. Where Jessica was openly cruel and Marcus was physically intimidating, Samantha worked in shadows, spreading lies and orchestrating humiliation from behind the scenes. Together, they had turned Beatrice's daily existence into a nightmare of small cruelties and public embarrassments. It started with accidental shoulder bumps in the hallway that sent her books flying. Then came the snide comments about her clothes, her appearance, her obvious status as an outsider. They would sit behind her in classes, making just enough noise to distract her while staying below the teacher's radar. The faculty at Westbridge High seemed either oblivious or indifferent to the systematic harassment. Mrs. Peterson, Beatrice's English teacher, was too focused on her lesson plans to notice the paper balls being thrown at the back of her student's head. Coach Williams was too busy managing his football stars to care about what happened to quiet girls in the hallways. Even Mr. Harrison, the principal, seemed more concerned with maintaining the school's reputation than protecting vulnerable students. The other students fell into 2 categories: those who actively participated in the mockery and those who looked the other way. Beatrice quickly learned that standing up for someone being bullied was social suicide at Westbridge. It was easier to pretend nothing was happening than risk becoming the next target. Each morning, Beatrice would wake up with a knot in her stomach, dreading the 8 hours of humiliation that awaited her. She would pack her lunch carefully, choosing foods that wouldn't make a mess if they were knocked over. She planned her routes through the school to avoid the spots where Jessica's group typically gathered. She developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when trouble was approaching and would duck into bathrooms or empty classrooms to avoid confrontation. "Why don't you just fight back?" The voice in her head sounded like Master Rodriguez. She could picture his weathered face, scarred from years of competition, and the way his eyes would narrow when he taught her about controlling distance and timing. She remembered the feel of the heavy bag under her gloves, the satisfaction of a perfectly executed combination, the rush of adrenaline after sparring sessions. But she also remembered her mother's tears when she explained why they were moving. "This is our chance for a fresh start, sweetheart. Promise me you'll try to fit in this time. No more fighting, no more trouble." Her parents had been horrified when they learned about her championship fights, worried that their daughter was becoming too aggressive, too willing to resort to violence. They wanted her to be normal, to make friends through shared interests rather than earned respect. The pattern of abuse escalated gradually. What started as verbal taunts evolved into physical harassment. Jessica would accidentally spill drinks near Beatrice's locker, forcing her to navigate puddles of sticky soda. Marcus would block doorways, making her ask permission to pass while he leered down at her. Samantha would take photos when Beatrice was at her most vulnerable moments and share them in group chats with cruel captions. The cafeteria became a particular source of dread. Beatrice had taken to sitting at a corner table near the windows, hoping the natural light would make her feel less isolated. She would eat quickly, mechanically, focusing on finishing her meal and escaping before the predators noticed her presence. But Jessica's group had made it their mission to seek her out, turning lunch into a daily performance of humiliation. "Look who's eating alone again," Jessica would announce loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Don't you have any friends to sit with, Beatrice? Oh wait, I forgot. Nobody actually likes you." Marcus would contribute his own observations. "Maybe if you weren't so weird, people would want to be around you. Have you tried not being such a freak?" Samantha's attacks were more subtle, but equally devastating. "I heard she talks to herself in the bathroom, like full conversations. It's honestly kind of sad." Through it all, Beatrice would keep her eyes on her food, chewing slowly, breathing deeply, reminding herself that this was temporary. In 2 years, she would graduate and leave this place forever. She could endure anything for 2 years. But should you have to? Master Rodriguez's voice again, challenging her acceptance of the situation. She could feel her muscle memory responding to the stress, her body naturally shifting into a more balanced stance, even while sitting. Her hands would unconsciously form loose fists under the table, and she would have to consciously relax them. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late October. Beatrice had been having a particularly difficult morning. She had overslept and missed breakfast, forgotten her chemistry homework, and received a disappointing grade on a history test she thought she had aced. She was looking forward to lunch as a brief respite from the day's mounting disasters. She had packed one of her favorite meals, a turkey and avocado sandwich her father had made, complete with the special mustard they had discovered at a local deli. It was comfort food, a small connection to home and family in the hostile environment of Westbridge High. She also had a container of her mother's homemade cookies, chocolate chip with sea salt, and a thermos of the special chai tea blend her grandmother had taught her to make. Beatrice settled into her usual corner table, unpacking her lunch with the careful precision of someone who had learned to find joy in small rituals. The sandwich looked perfect, the cookies smelled like home, and the tea was still steaming when she unscrewed the thermos cap. For a moment, she allowed herself to relax, to imagine she was anywhere else but in the Westbridge cafeteria. Well, Jessica's voice cut through her momentary peace like a knife. "Look what the little mouse brought for lunch today." Beatrice's shoulders tensed, but she didn't look up. She had learned that eye contact was interpreted as challenge or invitation for further harassment. Instead, she took a small bite of her sandwich, trying to project calm indifference. "I'm talking to you, freak." Jessica's voice had moved closer. Beatrice could see designer sneakers in her peripheral vision, expensive shoes that probably cost more than Beatrice's entire wardrobe. "Leave me alone," Beatrice said quietly, still not looking up. "I'm not bothering anyone." "Not bothering anyone?" Marcus's voice joined the chorus. "Your whole existence bothers people. You're like a walking mood killer." "Seriously," Samantha added, "just looking at you makes me depressed. Can't you eat somewhere else? Like maybe in a dumpster where you belong?" The nearby tables had gone quiet. Beatrice could feel dozens of eyes on her, students pausing their own conversations to watch the show. Some looked uncomfortable, but none intervened. This was entertainment, a brief diversion from the monotony of the school day. "Maybe we should help her find a better place to eat," Jessica said, her voice taking on a dangerous sweetness. "Somewhere more appropriate for someone like her." Before Beatrice could react, Jessica had grabbed her lunch tray and lifted it above her head. The carefully prepared sandwich, the homemade cookies, the special tea, all of it hovered in the air for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. "Oops," Jessica said with mock concern, and let go. The tray and its contents crashed to the floor in a spectacular mess. The thermos hit the ground with a metallic clang, sending hot tea splashing across the tiles. The sandwich exploded on impact, avocado and turkey scattered in all directions. The cookies, her mother's cookies, crumbled into dozens of pieces that were immediately ground underfoot as students gathered to watch the spectacle. But Jessica wasn't finished. As Beatrice stared at the ruins of her lunch, feeling tears threatening to spill over, the queen bee of Westbridge High delivered her final insult. She gathered saliva in her mouth and spat directly onto the remains of Beatrice's food, a glob of contempt that landed squarely on what was left of the sandwich. The sound of her spit hitting the food was audible in the sudden silence of the cafeteria. "There," Jessica said with satisfaction. "Now it's perfect for you." Something inside Beatrice snapped. Not broke, snapped, like a rubber band stretched too far. 8 years of training, 8 years of discipline, 8 years of learning to control her temper and choose her battles, all of it overwhelmed by a surge of rage so pure it felt like fire in her veins. She stood up slowly, her movements controlled and deliberate. For the first time since arriving at Westbridge, she looked Jessica directly in the eyes. The change in her posture was subtle, but unmistakable. Her shoulders squared, her spine straightened, and her feet automatically shifted into a balanced fighting stance. "What did you just do?" Beatrice's voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent cafeteria like the whisper of wind before a storm. Jessica, caught off guard by the transformation, took a half-step backward. "I what? I didn't do anything. It was an accident. You spat on my food." Beatrice's voice was still quiet, but something in her tone made the surrounding students instinctively create more space. "My mother made those cookies. My father made that sandwich. My grandmother taught me to make that tea." "So what?" Jessica's bravado was returning, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. "It's just food. Get over it." "Just food?" Beatrice stepped closer, and Jessica took another step back. "You just destroyed something that connected me to my family. You degraded something that gave me comfort, and then you spat on it like it was garbage." Marcus, sensing that his leader was losing control of the situation, stepped forward to intimidate the smaller girl. "Hey, back off, psycho. It's not that serious." Beatrice turned to look at him, and Marcus felt something cold run down his spine. The quiet, meek girl they had been tormenting for months was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely, someone whose eyes held the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly what they were capable of. You're right, Beatrice said, her voice carrying clearly across the now packed cafeteria. It's not that serious. Spitting on someone's food is just Tuesday for you three, isn't it? Just another way to remind someone that they don't matter. She looked around the cafeteria, making eye contact with students who had watched her humiliation without lifting a finger. How many of you have watched them do this to me? How many of you have seen them knock my books down, trip me in the hallways, make me feel like I don't deserve to exist in the same space as you? The silence was deafening. Dozens of students looked away, suddenly fascinated by their own lunches. I've been trying to be invisible, Beatrice continued, her voice growing stronger. I thought if I just kept my head down, didn't cause trouble, eventually you'd get bored and move on to someone else. I told myself that violence wasn't the answer, that there had to be a better way. She looked back at Jessica, who was now standing with her mouth slightly open, clearly not expecting this level of articulation from her usual victim. But you know what? Sometimes violence is the answer. Sometimes it's the only language bullies understand. The transformation was complete now. Beatrice's entire body language had changed. She moved with the fluid grace of a trained fighter, her weight balanced on the balls of her feet, her hands relaxed but ready. Students who had never paid attention to her before suddenly found themselves studying her movements, recognizing something predatory in the way she carried herself. You want to know what's not serious? Beatrice asked, taking another step toward Jessica. What's not serious is that I could have ended this on my first day here. What's not serious is that I've been holding back because I thought it made me a better person. Jessica finally found her voice. You're crazy. You can't just threaten people. I'm going to report you to the principal. Report me for what? Standing up, using my voice? I haven't touched you. Beatrice's smile was cold and sharp. Yet, the word hung in the air like a promise and a threat. Marcus, trying to reassert his dominance, moved to grab Beatrice's shoulder. That's enough, you little... He never finished the sentence. Beatrice's response was so fast that most observers missed it entirely. She pivoted on her left foot, used Marcus's forward momentum against him, and executed a perfect hip toss that sent all 200 pounds of him crashing to the cafeteria floor. The sound of his body hitting the tiles echoed like a gunshot. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and excited chatter. Marcus lay on his back, staring at the ceiling in shock, the wind knocked out of him. He had been taken down by a girl half his size, and he couldn't even process how it had happened. "Marcus!" Samantha shrieked, rushing to check on her fallen friend. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Jessica was backing away now, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You're insane. You just assaulted him. You're going to get expelled." "Self-defense," Beatrice said calmly, not even breathing hard. "He grabbed me first. Everyone saw it." She looked around the cafeteria again, and this time several students nodded in agreement. The dynamic had shifted completely. Where moments before she had been the victim, now she was clearly in control. Marcus was struggling to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and rage. "You little bitch," he snarled. "I'm going to destroy you." He lunged forward with all the subtlety of an angry bull, throwing a wild haymaker that would have done serious damage if it had connected. But Beatrice wasn't there when his fist arrived. She had stepped inside his reach, ducked under his arm, and delivered a sharp elbow to his solar plexus that doubled him over. As he gasped for breath, she grabbed his wrist and twisted it into a painful compliance hold that forced him to his knees. The technique was perfect, painful enough to control him completely, but not severe enough to cause permanent damage. "I don't want to hurt you," she said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make him wince. "But I will if you keep this up." "Let him go," Jessica screamed. "Someone call security." But nobody moved to help. The same students who had watched Beatrice's humiliation with detached interest were now completely absorbed in her demonstration of power. Some were recording with their phones, capturing every moment of the reversal. Beatrice looked at Jessica with something that might have been pity. 3 months, she said. For 3 months you've made my life miserable. You've made me dread coming to school, made me question my worth as a human being, made me think there was something fundamentally wrong with me. She released Marcus's wrist and stood up, smoothing down her uniform. Marcus remained on his knees, cradling his injured wrist and looking up at her with a mixture of fear and respect. "But there's nothing wrong with me," Beatrice continued. "The problem is that you're bullies. You're cowards who need to hurt other people to feel powerful. And the reason you picked me is because you thought I was weak." Jessica's face was pale now. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Look, maybe we got carried away. Maybe we can just forget this whole thing and—" "No!" Beatrice's voice cut through the attempt at appeasement like a blade. "We can't forget it, because you didn't just hurt me. You hurt everyone who's ever been in my position, every quiet kid, every outsider, every person who just wants to get through the day without being reminded that they don't fit in." She stepped closer to Jessica, who instinctively moved backward until she hit the wall. "You want to know what I learned in the years before I came here? I learned that there are 2 kinds of people in the world: those who use their strength to protect others, and those who use it to hurt them." "I'm sorry," Jessica whispered, and for the first time she seemed to mean it. "I'm really sorry. We'll leave you alone, I promise." "It's too late for that," Beatrice said, but her voice was gentler now. "The damage is done. But maybe it's not too late for you to learn something." She looked around the cafeteria one more time, addressing the crowd that had gathered. "This is what happens when you push someone too far. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I didn't want to fight, but you didn't give me a choice." Her gaze settled on a group of underclassmen who had been frequent targets of Jessica's group. "And for everyone who's been where I was, remember this. You don't have to accept being treated like garbage. You don't have to smile and take it. You have the right to defend yourself, to demand respect, to take up space in this world." She turned back to Jessica one last time. "I'm not going to hunt you down or make your life miserable. I'm not going to become what you were to me. But if you ever, and I mean ever, mess with me or anyone else the way you've been doing, you'll discover that what you saw today was me being gentle." The threat was delivered in the same quiet tone she had used throughout the confrontation, but its impact was unmistakable. Jessica nodded rapidly, tears streaming down her face. Samantha helped Marcus to his feet, both of them looking like they had seen a ghost. The hulking teenager who had spent months intimidating smaller students now couldn't make eye contact with the girl who had effortlessly put him on the ground. "Clean up my lunch," Beatrice said, gesturing to the mess on the floor. "All of it." Without a word of protest, all 3 of them dropped to their knees and began picking up the scattered food, wiping up the spilled tea, gathering the broken pieces of the thermos. The same hands that had destroyed her meal now worked frantically to undo the damage, though everyone knew it was purely symbolic. As they cleaned, Beatrice became aware of the whispers spreading through the cafeteria. Students were looking at her with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Some seemed frightened, but others, particularly those who had been victims themselves, looked at her with something approaching hero worship. "Holy crap," she heard someone whisper. "Did you see how fast she moved? Where did she learn to fight like that? I heard she's been taking karate or something. She made Marcus look like a little kid." I can't believe Jessica was actually crying. The news of the cafeteria confrontation spread through Westbridge High like wildfire. By the end of the day, the story had been told and retold dozens of times, each version adding new details or embellishments. Social media exploded with videos and commentary, turning Beatrice from invisible outsider to overnight legend. The aftermath was swift and dramatic. Principal Harrison called Beatrice to his office, where she calmly explained the situation, providing witnesses and context for her actions. The security footage confirmed her account. She had been defending herself against harassment and assault. When Marcus's parents threatened to press charges, the video evidence made it clear that their son had been the aggressor. More importantly, other students began coming forward with their own stories of harassment from Jessica's group. The investigation revealed a pattern of systematic bullying that had been ignored for years. Jessica was suspended for a week and required to attend anger management counseling. Marcus was removed from the football team and faced his own suspension. Samantha was banned from social media at school and required to perform community service. But the real change was in the social dynamics of the school itself. Beatrice found herself approached by students who had never spoken to her before, some seeking advice, others offering friendship, still others simply wanting to express their admiration for her courage. "I wish I had your guts," said a freshman named Ashley, who had been one of Jessica's frequent targets. "I've been dealing with her crap for 2 years, and I never knew what to do about it." "You don't need to fight," Beatrice told her, "but you do need to stand up for yourself. Find your voice, set boundaries, and don't let anyone convince you that you deserve to be treated badly." The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Some students seemed to expect Beatrice to become the new queen bee, to use her newfound status to dominate others the way Jessica had. Others were simply afraid of her, giving her a wide berth as if she might explode at any moment. But Beatrice had no interest in becoming what she had defeated. She used her influence to create a safe space for other outsiders, forming a lunch group for students who didn't fit into the traditional social hierarchies. She worked with the administration to establish better anti-bullying policies and reporting systems. Jessica, for her part, seemed genuinely changed by the experience. The humiliation of being publicly defeated had forced her to confront the reality of her behavior. She approached Beatrice privately a few weeks later, offering a sincere apology that went far beyond her earlier desperate attempts to avoid consequences. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "I know I hurt you, and I know saying sorry doesn't fix that, but I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be scared, to have people looking at you like you're nothing." Beatrice studied her former tormentor, seeing someone who looked genuinely remorseful rather than simply caught. "I appreciate the apology," she said finally, "and I hope you've learned something from this. But more than that, I hope you use what you've learned to be better, not just to me, but to everyone." Jessica nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "I will. I promise I will." 6 months later, Beatrice had settled into her new role as one of the most respected students at Westbridge High. She had joined the school's martial arts club, where she helped train other students in self-defense. She had made genuine friends among the formerly invisible students who had found their voices after watching her example. But perhaps most importantly, she had found peace with her own power. The girl who had once hidden her strength out of fear of being judged had learned that there was honor in being strong, as long as that strength was used wisely. Standing in the same cafeteria where her transformation had begun, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about Master Rodriguez's teachings, about the difference between being a warrior and being a bully, about the responsibility that came with the ability to hurt others. True strength isn't about never fighting, she realized. It's about fighting for the right reasons, in the right way, at the right time. She had learned that sometimes the greatest act of courage wasn't avoiding conflict, but standing up when standing up mattered. She had discovered that her gentleness was not weakness, but a choice, and that choice had more power when it was backed by the option to be otherwise. The quiet girl who had once been afraid of her own shadow had become someone who cast shadows of her own, not to hide others in darkness, but to provide shelter for those who needed protection. She had learned that being strong didn't mean being cruel, and that true victory wasn't about defeating your enemies, but about refusing to become them. As she watched the diverse group of students at her lunch table, Former outcasts who had found their place, former victims who had found their voices, former enemies who had found redemption. Beatrice smiled. This was what winning looked like. Not the moment of physical triumph, but the lasting change that came after. Not the fear in her bully's eyes, but the confidence in her friend's postures. Not the power to hurt, but the wisdom to heal. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning.